Welcome, everyone. My name is Thomas Poggi. I'm the director of the Yale Global Justice Program, one of the sponsoring organizations of this event, alongside the Yale Poynter Fellowship in Journalism, which has been supporting the visit to Yale this semester of our moderator, Khadija Sharife, as a Poynter Fellow. Based in South Africa, Khadija Sharife is an award-winning investigative journalist and senior editor for Africa at Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Her focus is illicit financial flows, natural resources, and political economy. Sharife is the former director of Plateforme de Protection des Lanceurs d'Alerte en Afrique, the platform for the protection of whistleblowers, and currently also a board member of Finance Uncovered. She has worked with forums including the Pan-African Parliament, the African Union, OECD, and UNEP. She's the author of Texas, If You Can, Africa. One secret tip before I turn it over to her. Next week, 1 week from now, we have Andrew Feldman visiting, and he will be talking to us about the arms trade. At 11:30, 1 week from now, on the 12th of March at the same place. Khadija will now introduce our guests for today. Khadija.
Thank you. Advocate William Bourdon was one of the first legal minds to really specialize in and fight for the whistleblower, not just as a case, but as a human condition where a person and their body becomes alienated from the same world that they are trying to protect with the disclosure that they make. And they fall into this very dangerous and lonely state outside of the societies in which they are supposed to live. The brilliance of his mind, his instincts as a maverick, his fight for justice, which as someone coming from apartheid South Africa, born into it, you can see it's almost as an activist and as a freedom fighter. And it's very, very rare in the world, but especially rare in the legal field. And when he fights, sometimes when you hear him talk, when you see him advocate for things, it becomes almost electric because of the way in which he does it. So he's known for cases like Edward Snowden, LuxLeaks, SwissLeaks, from whom we heard Hervé Falciani a few weeks ago. But most of his cases are unknown because when it's unknown is when they are safest, when they can still recover, when they have not become a body of evidence forced to relive a trauma over and over. But when he considered the condition of Africa, where almost 80% of countries lack any protected disclosure laws, and where the remaining 8 or 9 countries, including South Africa, have laws that are so scant or limited to labor law, no protection, from prosecution, and which exposes the whistleblower through contradictory laws that canalize and crush civil society. It could be the Official Secrets Act, the lack of access to information, or even just common law that allows things which are not explicitly prohibited. In an authoritarian state, a dictatorship, or a dominant party state, that's very problematic. And that's when you see that whistleblowers are just a litmus test for justice and accountability within these societies overall. Because what they are disclosing very often is content, as we saw in LuxLeaks and SwissLeaks, that should have been in the public domain but wasn't, whether it's because a sovereignty or a government commercialized their laws in order to have a financial gain, or whether the government colluded to ensure that. So in most countries across Southern Africa and West Africa, you see that you can't publish any information involving a government, shared, distributed, even as a tiny newspaper vendor or a journalist or on a blog, because that information is classically protected disclosure law. So in 2016, late 2016, Advocate Bourdon was thinking about this problem of Africa. And in his a small room in his law offices in Paris, idea of a non-profit center that would provide pro bono legal assistance to whistleblowers from Africa or involving Africa. And with that came the need to provide end-to-end encrypted security, media support, because in most of these countries, about 80 to 85%, there is no judicial process to go through. So the only way out is through disclosure to media, whether in your country, which is often very impossible, or abroad. And the center also assists with relocation, asylum, and a number of other things, most of which cannot be disclosed. Within the first month, one of South Africa's most important whistleblowers, Mosilo Motepo, walked through the doors, and with her followed Bianca Goodson, another critical whistleblower whom we'll hear from tonight, and she just testified at the South African State Capture Commission yesterday. Between these two whistleblowers was the primary thrust that removed President Zuma from office and that exposed a paradigm that had captured South Africa's economy in ways that the regional economies from Namibia to Angola to Botswana had already been captured, in ways that authoritarian regimes, whether it's Republic of Congo or Chad, are renowned for having done. And with it came a vast number of cases from Congo to Nigeria, Namibia to Algeria. We heard from Johannes Stefansson on Namibia's fish rot case a few weeks ago. But the whistleblowers who are known and who are listed on the PLAAF website are almost the unlucky ones, because they are people whose lives and identities are frozen in that moment in time. They become prophets who are pointing at something and who are hoping that the societies around them will take notice. And that's something that William has done. He's advocated a safe way forward for those people to disclose a truth that they otherwise would not be able to do without being killed, without being imprisoned, or without being silenced. Just last week, two whistleblowers in the case involving formerly US sanctioned Dan Gertler, who was in partnership with the Kabila regime, came out of the legal closet to stand up to him, and now their lives are in danger. So that's something that has been ongoing. Almost every single whistleblower suffers this intrinsic and fundamental threat to themselves. And the world has not yet understood what is needed to keep these people alive as the societies around them feed off them for better or worse. I'll turn it over to William now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khadija. So, yeah, I take the floor now. Hello?
Yes, please take the floor.
Okay. So first, I'm very pleased to participate to this meeting. Very pleased also to see you again, very good friends, Khadija and Bianca. Your introduction, Khadija, was extremely friendly, too positive. I feel very modest today regarding the difficulties, the structural difficulties to protect efficiency of the whistleblower in Africa, even if Bianca knows that thanks to all PLAAF team, we have been able to support you and your friends in your battle to obtain the departure of Zuma on your protection. So I'm very proud of all the job which has been done in South Africa with you, for you, and of course with the support of dear Khadija. Let me concentrate my speech on 2-3 points. One, in Europe, we have reached a quite good level of protection of whistleblower. Of course, with nuances between some countries, but little by little, we will reach in the next year a more or less satisfactory level of protection of whistleblower, especially because European countries have a delay which exhausts at the end of this year to implement in their law the European Union Directive on the protection of persons who report breach of law. This directive is important because it will oblige European countries, not only for those who refuse to do it, to protect whistleblower, as Portugal, for instance, and I will come back to Portugal in a few minutes, but also to enlarge the protection of the whistleblower, especially because the directive applied to reporting persons working in the private or public sector who acquire information and breach in a work-related context, including, and this is the new enlargement, person having a self-employed statute, shareholders and persons belonging to the administrative management or supervisory body of an undertaking, including non-executive members, any person working under the supervision and direction of contractors, subcontractors, supplier, The directive also shall apply to reporting persons where they report or publicly disclose information on breach acquired in a work-based relationship which has since ended. So it's an enlargement. Enlargement not only specifically to the individual with good faith in a work-related context disclose information, to his relative, to the NGO, to those who help him, and including to those who finish their job. We can be satisfied with this European invitation to modernize the law, but of course we see the antagonism between the modernization wished by European Union and the populist forces which grew up in Europe and which obviously consider the whistleblower as an enemy or as a foe. My second idea is to say that there are still some threshold to be reached. I've been invited by a commission of the French Parliament who has a duty to evaluate the way in which France protected whistleblower. And I raised one or two points. First point, the situation of a French individual or European individual working in Singapore, in Hong Kong, Cayman Island, for a French company, or not only for a French company, but we can be in capacity to disclose information which could be considered as a matter of main public interest for French tax administration or French judge. How to enlarge the protection of whistleblowers to those who are not located in the country. The only link is a common citizenship. And the second common link is the fact that thanks to their potential release, they could contribute to the revelation of main financial scandal. And the members of the parliament were sufficiently nice to appear interested by this idea, but certainly it will be a new frontier for the European lawmakers to consider that if we say that protecting whistleblower is a main duty for the democracy to have access to main financial scandal, it makes sense to enlarge their protection to those who work at large in the condition I just explained. Third idea, to what extent should we enlarge the protection to any kind of citizen who one day at night, not a geek, not a fanatic, but by random or because he's an extremely skillful researcher, just fall on something which could be considered as a matter of main public interest, without any working relationship, without any relationship with any kind of industry or any kind of administration. This will be the next frontier, obviously. And we have some text recommendation from Council of Europe recently, last year, which stated in recommendation 2300, the term whistleblower must be broadly defined so as to cover any individual or legal entity that reveal or report in good faith a crime or lesser offense, a breach of the law, or a threat or harm to the public interest of which they have become aware either directly or indirectly. And we can see some other sources in UN Assembly report, September 8, 2015, in various decisions from the European Court of Human Rights. And according to all this jurisprudence and recommendation, we see that there are some individual public responsible who have envisaged the fact that the next frontier could be to enlarge the protection of whistleblower to any kind of individual in the world. And of course, immediately, we see the risk. Keeping in mind the fact that the social media are a tool for the best and for the worst. And for the worst, when it's a tool for vendetta, for main harm of reputation, private life, etc. So how to conciliate the universalization of protection of whistleblower and not to give the possibility to individuals inspired by bad faith to disseminate or diffuse information which could be extremely harmful for reputation or for private life. In my view, we should consider that the protection of this new generation of whistleblower should be submitted to new conditions, more severe, more demanding than for a classical whistleblower. For instance, a level of désintéressement or good faith extremely important, without any trace of impurity or personal motivation. And second condition, the fact that their leaks should be related not only to a threat of public interest, but to a very, very serious threat of public interest, or the revelation of facts which could be considered as extremely harmful for public interest. So a threshold in the seriousness, in the gravity, which could permit to conciliate this universalization of protection of whistleblower with the fact to mitigate and to reduce the risk of instrumentalization by bad faith. An example, in the next weeks, I will move to Lisbon to defend Rui Pinto. And thanks to Rui Pinto, who very courageous young Portuguese guy, he has been at the origin of football leagues. Football leagues has been at the origin of main criminal inquiries, which are driven by Eurojust and many European prosecutors. Certainly hundreds of millions of euros should be fined against football clubs, agents in the next year. It will be purification of the football industry, completely polluted by criminality. And thanks also to Pinto, I joined him in the revelation of Luanda Leaks. Luanda Leaks have permitted to have access to all the way in which the most wealthy woman in Africa has embezzled public money in Angola since many years. And we will plead the acquittement of Rui Pinto without any legal protection of Portugal. We will plead the acquitment based on international law and the jurisprudence of Human Rights European Court. And in Portugal, and this is a kind of metaphor of the duality of the whistleblower statute. In one way, it's criminalized. You appear before the tribunal as someone in risk of years and years of detention. But because of his contribution to truth and public interest matters, he appears also simultaneously as a protected witness. It's kind of a new duplication of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. is in risk to be considered as a main criminal, but is celebrated as a protected witness. So how the Portuguese judge will deal with that? He's no more in jail, he's no more house arrest, he's protected day and night by 5 escort guards because of death threat he received all these last years. This decision will be extremely important for protection of whistleblowers in Europe. In addition, one word on PLAAF. What we did in Africa was extremely important. The idea to start the establishment of a platform in Africa, because it's in Africa where whistleblowers are the less protected, not only are the less protected, but are in risk to be tortured, executed. And the risk occurred 10 days ago. Two whistleblowers have been sentenced to death by a Congolese tribunal 2 weeks ago. And we have been obliged 1 year, 18 months ago, to do something which is not very familiar for an NGO. That is to say, to organize an exfiltration in urgency of individual and family, which demand some tools, which demand to have access to some networks of politicians, diplomatic world, some investigative journalists. It's a new competence. Defending whistleblower require the interaction skillfully of new competence and exfiltration. I've never did any kind of infiltration in my life, and I was obliged to do it to avoid certainly the worst for them. So we see at which point defend whistleblower require with much intensity a commitment extremely important with new competence. So my dream, of course, with all my team, with Khadija, if she's okay, but I know that she will, is to try to duplicate what we did in Africa, in South America, where a need of protection of whistleblowers is extremely important. Of course, in Asia, especially in South Asia. Last idea, and I terminate. The next frontier, of course, the most difficult will be to protect whistleblower acting in secret services. The counter-terrorism and the terrorist threat is a worse threat to obtain protection of whistleblower in security services. Snowden cannot appear in Europe. He cannot appear in Germany. He cannot appear in England. The avenue proposed by the lawmakers for those who work in security services is so tricky, so difficult, that there is no chance to see any kind of Snowden appear in Europe in case he feels the duty to reveal, for instance, new technique of massive surveillance. It's a new frontier, certainly the most complex one, because there is an antagonism, a dilemma, which is the most violent between the necessity of protecting whistleblower and the necessity to maintain a level of secret defenses for all those who work for helping us against the terrorism threat. So that's very modestly some few ideas I wanted to share with you, and I would be happy to, if we should, to answer to any questions. Sorry for my English, who usually Khadija can testify is much more fluent, but I had a very tough week, so this very tough week makes my English a little, not so nice as you know it, Khadija. Thank you very much.
No. Your English is beautiful. And if everybody has questions for William, they can type it into the chat box or just raise their hands and ask it directly. And as people are developing their questions, I just wanted to introduce one of our key whistleblowers, Bianca Goodson, someone who's become a very dear friend to me. She was a girl from a small town. Her father was a pastor and her mother was a housewife, and I love both her parents. But really what got her out was that she was brilliant. You know, she got out of the system of class and the way in which apartheid categorized people under group area acts to live in a certain area, live a certain life, be a certain type of person. But she got out because of her mind, by way of scholarships, and she ate a lot of high fiber bran in college to get by, which I remember she told me gave her great skin. And then she got out and went to work for some really top-notch multinationals like Anglo American, where she was paid well, living the life, got married, had a kid. But in that time, she was headhunted because of her integrity, because of her brilliance, because of the fact that she was a young Black woman on the rise. They offered her the opportunity to be the CEO of Trillian, emerge at the forefront of South Africa's state capture scandal. And while the notion of a captured economy is 2 decades old, it's born from decolonization, the end of apartheid, and speaks to the transition between corporate entities and the state. What happened was that the doors were open to create a new middle class of people who were previously dispossessed, but those door openers were political fixers who protected these multinationals, some of whom had propped up apartheid, from the reins of democracy. That was how Lita Nyoni from the Bato Trust moved into regiments, which got a stake of deals. And from regiments, Eric Wood and with Celine Issa, who was a partner and an architect of the Guptas, they created a new, and that company evidenced the hijacking, the repurposing, and the eroding of state institutions. So it's not just about money that was stolen. It's about the detoothing of STARS, the South African Revenue Service, which had investigators who are looking into this issue. It's about the overall debt that was created from the country, the public budget, as much as $800 billion alone, which had pension funds, debt repayments up to $200 billion, borrowing increased by $80 billion by 2019, government guarantees to the tune of $500 billion for certain entities like Eskom. And so Bianca, alongside Mosilo Motepo, whom we previously heard from, was one of the 2 whistleblowers whose bodies as a human being was hammered down into evidence. And every single day for years, they had to keep providing this evidence over and over to the governments. And eventually that reached Parliament. And then it reached what we now know of as South Africa's State Capture Commission, or the Zondo Commission, where Bianca testified just yesterday. And one of the most critical whistleblowers not come forward, what we consider to be South Africa's biggest scandal post the arms deal, and we'll hear from Andrew Feinstein next week on the 12th, but what we consider to be the most devastating institutional scandal that disrupted the fiscal social contract between citizens and the state would never have been known. It came down to 2 women who put their lives on the line, who stood on the front line and decided to speak up at great loss to themselves. Until today, their incomes, their family lives, their professional lives are in disarray, and they are vulnerable to in ways that we can't discuss, and so very precarious, simply because they decided to bear witness. I'll turn it over to Bianca now. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I see a few people on the chat box actually know my story, so I'm not going to necessarily go into too much detail about what I've been through, because I do want to actually talk about what William has just spoken about. But for those of you who don't know me, exactly what Khadija has said, you know, I had a fairly average life, and seemingly overnight it changed. I was very fortunate, however, because I didn't work for this corrupt organization for very long. I was on there for 3 months. But one of the most significant pieces of support that I received was PLAAF. You know, I didn't even know, and I wasn't even aware that the information that I had could support criminal charges or civil charges in corruption. Because being an average human being just working 9 to 5, you don't even really know what corruption is in the legal sense. You know, you've got an ethical sort of sense and a bit of a judgment, but legally you don't even know what it was. And I remember in my first communication with Khadija and with PLAAF, you know, I needed that expertise from them where they could look at my information, they could join the dots, and they could actually say, you know, Bianca, this is legitimate proof of corrupt dealings. And when that happened, obviously I got the fear of God in me because forgive me for saying this, but shit got real. You know, things became what I thought was a risk was realizing to be an actual risk. And this is not something that you have a contingency for. You know, you don't have your pension plan or savings for something like this. You have savings for a holiday with your kids or to buy a new car or something like that. You don't have a special stash as like a, you know, a fund, a legal fund. And I really, I was so grateful to get PLAAF support, because the biggest support that they gave me was really in two elements. The one was just the human factor, because I didn't know what I was going to go through. And Khadija and William were there to help me through it, and to just sort of coach me a little bit, to let me know what I could expect from the press, from people that are implicated and so forth. But more importantly, they really helped me with the legal strategy, and they covered my legal costs. Because if I didn't have that, I would never have been able to blow the whistle. I couldn't afford lawyers. You know, and that's what, you know, I just wanted to mention and link this back a little bit to what William was saying earlier. You know, listening to what William says makes me a bit envious that I live in South Africa, because clearly Europe is streaks ahead in multiple elements of this. One, in their definition of what a whistleblower is, and clearly in the legislation that appears to be, you know, being discussed at least. Having these discussions about whistleblowers, in my opinion, makes people think about whistleblowers in a different way. As somebody who was directly impacted by this, I can see it firsthand how the concept of a whistleblower is actually a societal problem. And I feel, and it's probably just because I come from South Africa where there's almost no legislation to support whistleblowers, I feel that you could change legislation, but if you don't change people's perception of whistleblowers, and you don't change that stigma of them being troublemakers, whistleblowers are never really going to have much of an incentive, because after you blow the whistle, you still have to carry on living. You know, and what PLAAF gives great support on is going through their process to the point where you want to blow the whistle and dealing with a lot of the legal implications of that. I mean, and pragmatically, that helped me with some of the support that I needed, for example, that I needed to see a psychiatrist. But you need to move on afterwards, and there's a gap there. And sometimes I feel that that gap could actually be filled by just people honestly not just saying that you're brave, but honestly, like, respecting the fact that you made a big life-changing decision and recognizing you for that. I feel if that happened in South Africa, for example, I wouldn't be unemployed right now. It would be easier for me to get my life back after making this big decision. And I think that's where the disjoint is, slightly. And I appreciate that what PLAAF does is really looking at the legislative sort of structure and the mechanisms of that when it comes to whistleblowers. But the problem is, in places like South Africa, we're not even there. So to expect, and if we do get there, the wheels of justice are going to turn very slowly, I'm sure. But in the meantime, I feel very personally that conversations like this need to happen more frequently so that people don't perceive whistleblowing in a bad way. And I'm just going to end very quickly to prove my point about this. I've got a very young daughter. She's 8 years old. And on the school playground, you know, she would come back home from school and she would say, "Mom, this other little girl did this to her." And I would ask her, "Why wouldn't you tell your teacher?" And she would tell me, "I don't want to be a tattletale." Now, this is my daughter, and I'm a state capture whistleblower. There's no way that I encourage that kind of view in this house. I don't say to my daughter, "Don't be a tattletale." I encourage being tattletales, right? Because I'm a whistleblower. But my daughter at this young age has got the stigma from somewhere, and it categorically wasn't me. And I wanted to always be able to respectfully speak up when she's got a point. And it made me realize how, as a society, these kind of conversations have to start at home, and they've got to start with kids and in companies and in boardrooms, and it has to become more of a norm. And I think Europe possibly is more advanced and mature in that as a society, but there are so many other countries that I think are failing and lacking so badly, and the consequences for the people that make these brave decisions is absolutely horrendous. It's exactly what Khadija said. You become a walking evidence docket, and it seems as though people see you as nothing else, not been good enough for anything other than the evidence that you can give or the affidavits that you can write. And you know, that wasn't my plan in my life. And just yesterday, I was called to give more evidence and more affidavits and more testimonies on something that happened 5 years ago. You know, so it feels like it never ends. And it's exactly what Khadija says, is like you almost get frozen in that moment. And without the support of structures like PLAAF and discussions such as these, people like me, I think, stay frozen. And through forums like this and institutions like PLAAF, we could probably get thawed out a little bit, which will help us move forward. But that's, I guess, what I have to say. I'm not sure if there's anything else that, you know, Thomas or Khadija would like me to speak on.
Khadija, are you there? Okay, then I think let's see whether we have questions and comments from the audience. Mary Inman is saying, William, I wholeheartedly agree that the protection of whistleblowers requires a multidisciplinary approach with NGOs like PLAAF, legal practitioners like yourself, journalists, and more. We have seen a successful model arise in the protection of UK whistleblower Jonathan Taylor, where Whistleblowers International Network, Whistleblowers UK, Media Freedom Rapid Response, private legal practitioners and other journalists have organized to prevent Taylor's extradition to Monaco. Can you formulate that into a question, Mary? And what do you want him to say about the case?
Yeah, no, I'm just super interested in what William is doing and the monumental effect he's having by creating groups like PLAAF and his proposal to create similar groups in Latin America and South Asia. But for some of the, and there's no but, I mean, I think that's incredibly laudable. And I think that what is helpful for so many of these whistleblowers, Bianca included, is sometimes a multidisciplinary response is required. When William speaks about the new frontier, I think he's talking about maybe this multidisciplinary approach. So I'd just be keen to know, William, like, who is your dream team that you would bring together in a case like Bianca's or Rui Pinto's or Johannes Stephenson? And is that a new model that we can implement moving forward?
Well, simple. Thanks, Mary. So we have a chance to meet for the first time. We'll certainly continue our dialogue. I have the chance to work at Paris with one of the best teams I've never worked with. So I have junior lawyers, extremely dedicated. And of course, it's not so difficult to find in the new generation of lawyers and jurists some very skillful, smart, dedicated individual persons. So, but it's not sufficient. All this is possible because after 40 years working as a lawyer and a human rights activist, I've been able to create a network all over the world of journalists, media, lawyers, activists, members of parliament, sometimes president of some countries in Africa. So, for instance, I'm the lawyer of Senegal, which is not a completely virtuous country, but I have a direct access to the president, which permit me to convey some messages discreetly in some circumstances. But nothing replaces the trust. It's the question of the trust is extremely important in the protection of whistleblower, because we have to act extremely quickly, immediately. So we have to rely on people with which we work. It's a very basic observation. And we have also to create a confident relationship with whistleblower, who sometimes are psychologically affected, vulnerable, sometimes a little, for good reasons, paranoiac, with a certain level of paranoia, who have difficulties to give that trust. So it's not only kind of interdisciplinary ambition. We have to be very psychological. It's an activity which demands to be respectful of the fragility and changing of moods of people because of their very complex and difficult situation. So it's not given to anyone. It demands a lot of experience, but it demands certainly to have access to a very good team all over the world and have this chance and this privilege.
Thank you. Francois, can you unmute yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Francois Dengue. I'm a PhD student at Howard University in Washington, D.C. at the African Studies Department. Very sincerely, I want first to congratulate Professor Thomas Poge. This is an incredibly important event. I was there already last time, and unfortunately, we know that we were disturbed. Protecting whistleblowers in Africa is critical nowadays, more than ever. And these courageous whistleblowers are doing a fantastic job, putting their life at risk for a question of integrity that I hope we all support. I'm very impressed by their courage, given the environment which is not conducive for this type of actions. And the work that the Yale Global Justice Program is doing to bring awareness to them, not only in the academia, but also in the general public is critical. And I think that I will prolong this thing at the Department of, at Howard, to say that these people are doing a job, and the academia should put their nose inside and bring their type of support. I very much congratulate Khadija and even the lawyer, Mr. Bourdon. So I have a lot of questions, but I will ask just two, and if I have time, I will ask other questions lately. My first question is to Mr. Bourdon. Unfortunately, I was supposed to hear more about you, about the organization of how you're organizing to protect the whistleblowers, some practical informations that I did not have. You have a lot of development about Portugal and Europe. I don't know how you are organizing your institution, and if there is a whistleblower somewhere in Africa, how can he or she, what must she or he do to get in touch to know that he gets protections? And the second question is this one. These whistleblowers, as I said, they are expressing, they are showing courage one cannot imagine. And you say some of them are killed, and some of them lose their jobs. some of them lose their family, they have to be protected and all these things. And we had an event that happened last year relating to the African Development Bank. And I would like to know if one of you has an idea of what happened. You know that some whistleblower was there with a lot of evidence, and we don't know what happened. I would like to know if Mr. Bourdon or any one of you heard about what happened and what is happening now to the whistleblowers at the African Development Bank who came with some sort of evidence. I'm not a specialist, but the things that they were bringing on the table, things that were really important, but they were not heard, and a decision was taken that was not in the direction that the whistleblower were helping. Even the US administration came in, but I don't know exactly what. So maybe if it's out of topic, it should be considered like that, but I'm really, it is a case that I would like to know more about it. Thank you, sorry.
So thank you very much for these very relevant questions. First, I want to thank everybody to have given me the occasion to share with you my experience. I have to leave in a few minutes, take a cab who's waiting for me, running after time. But first answer, apologies for this very pragmatical answer, but on PLAAF website, you will have all the methodology, toolbox proposed to potential whistleblower to understand how they can have access to us, obtain our support, our legal support. So please go on PLAAF website. And apologies for this very too pragmatical answer, but I have not so much time to explain how it works. And of course, Khadija could do it. You raise the main questions about the protection of whistleblower in main international institutions. I'm the lawyer for the moment of two anonymous potential whistleblower who work in main international and European institutions. They are in a quite vulnerable situation. The rules which have been adopted, most of this institution are not in adequacy with the best standard of protection of whistleblower. They are very far from that. They are always in risk of huge retaliation. And just to finish by this this idea, you may have a very exceptional level of law, anti-laundering money, anti-corruption. You may have in the same country a bunch of corrupted people who don't give a damn of the law. Simultaneously, you may have in some countries a high level of protection of whistleblower, but when the employees or the administration is very cynical, they don't give a damn, except if they are in risk of a main reputational risk. They don't give a damn to have to pay fines or damages by a labor judge 5, 6, or 10 years after. They don't give a damn. They just play a very tricky and cynical game. So more the protection is weak, and more the whistleblower has to compensate by the protection of trade union, NGO, journalists, media, lawyers, to mitigate the consequences of a very dirty game which can be played by employers, and these employers may be, of course, they may be fined, of course, in the main international institution. So thank you, everybody. I have to leave. I wish to everybody a very nice weekend, and hope to have the chance to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Khadija. See you soon.
Bye-bye, boss. Kisses. So disclosure on PLAAF, I think that question came up. Basically, you can go onto the website and you can disclose via encrypted email, Signal. You could reach out to us directly. And the first thing that happens is the whistleblower has their leak and their personhood, what country they're coming from, who they are, what vulnerabilities they face, vetted by in-house counsel. It looks at the country context, it looks at the laws that are in place, the different jurisdictions that the leak will cross, and thereafter we connect back with the whistleblower. Sometimes we have to turn away cases where there's limited resources or where there's no counsel in specific countries that have no conflict of interest involved and so forth. So it's a little bit of a tricky process, but each case is assessed individually and directly by the right lawyers and the right team. Bianca, I wanted to ask you, what do you feel South Africa, which has the most developed protected disclosure laws and Companies Act, what do you feel South Africa should have had for whistleblowers that it did not have, having gone through the gauntlet and been portrayed almost as the poster child for whistleblowing on the African continent? Because you guys appear to have come out of it, but did you really come out of it? Were you really okay? What really happened to you? Because during your talk, you were very modest and you didn't speak to a lot of the very dangerous, very expensive, very difficult experiences you went through.
Yeah, you see, Khadija, I mean, now that I'm on the other side of blowing the whistle, I mean, it's been a couple of years now, it's been 3 years since I've made my public disclosure. You know, I don't feel that South Africa's got any whistleblower protection. We've got the Protected Disclosures Act, but that's in the context of, like, the Protected Disclosures Act, and you know this, wouldn't work for me because I've resigned. So South Africa, for me specifically, what I went through, South Africa didn't have any kind of legislation or any kind of protection for me trying to stop the state being extorted. You know, so firstly, I think that something should be put in place because at the moment there's absolutely nothing, right? And there's absolutely, I mean, if anybody knew my complete story, which I've detailed in a blog because it was part of my therapy, nobody would actually have the incentive to blow the whistle because my story is harrowing, right? I've lost my family, I've lost all my savings. You know, I'm still being treated on a weekly basis for post-traumatic stress disorder. I've lost my career. I don't have a sense of being able to earn a living. I'm in a constant state of depression because my life has just fallen apart. My daughter was impacted by the trauma that I went through. She had to get support. It led in divorce, you know, and the biggest thing for me right now is actually just I cannot find a way to get back to the life that I had before blowing the whistle. Exactly as you said, it's like you're frozen in time. And South Africa, in my opinion, failed me dismally because there was nothing in place, both legislatively and in society, to help me do the right thing. Instead, it was against me doing the right thing. So, in my opinion, South Africa just needs to get something because right now, anything is better than nothing. And that's a very basic and a very juvenile response, but it is completely true from my experience.
No, it's 100% spot on because there is no law, but there is the veil or the delusion of a law. And we found that less than 31 cases were actually resolved. And as you said, it's limited to labor law. So you are not an employee anymore. So the law just trapped you in a corner where exposing yourself would be incriminating yourself. There was no protection from prosecution and so forth. Thank you for answering that question. I think Professor Poggi has a question.
Yeah, if I may. Obviously, whistleblowers hit a nerve, right? Whistleblowers are very annoying and can be extremely damaging to the organizations or individuals about whom they blow the whistle. And that is shown by the very aggressive response that they often suffer. So my question is, are there any agents that try to exploit that are trying to sort of engage in fake whistleblowing, trying to discredit a competing organization or maybe a competing political party or a competing politician that clothe themselves in the mantle of a whistleblower, but really convey false information? And if there are such people, if there are such cases, what mechanisms, what protections do you use to ferret them out and to make sure that you yourselves are not discredited by helping such people discredit an organization that really doesn't deserve to be so discredited?
Khadija, maybe before you answer that, could I just maybe add something that I've experienced now with the State Capture Commission, Thomas? You know, one of the things that I've seen consistently is, if you want to call it, the legitimate whistleblowers, right? So the people that are doing it with the right intention. So they're not like, you know, a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? What I've seen consistently in South Africa is that those are the individuals that generally actually have a lot of information to actually prove their claim. So it's not just one statement, you know, that is maybe a bit contentious that they make, you know, that they, like in my case, for example, I had a copy of my computer that backed up everything that I was saying. And likewise for quite a few of the other whistleblowers. And what we see now in the commission is this public speculation of some people that are portraying themselves as a whistleblower when in fact they were quite complicit. And what I've noticed in the commission is that those are the people that have no evidence to back it up and are really just making these loose statements and sort of joining these dots of almost like you know, these theories of I don't know, it's like just these weird ideas that come together but can't be backed up because they're subjective. That's what I've noticed. I'm not too sure if Khadija, I'm sure she has a different view.
I mean, just speaking on behalf of PLAAF, we've had to turn away whistleblowers that did bring critical information because their motives were designed to target a competing political party, a competing company at a strategic moment in time. So they were disclosing as a disruptive force for a gain that was not in the public interest, even though indirectly it might have a public interest gain. So those were the people we turned away. There were others who were opportunistic and, as Bianca said, decided to come forward as whistleblowers. So it's a question of looking at the whole person and the context in which they are disclosing as well as what they are disclosing. Forensically, you have to vet the information right down to the metadata to see that nothing has been changed. We found that some people who were whistleblowers, the forensic companies hired by the state-owned entity to investigate their data altered things in such a way that would trap them. So for the whistleblower, for the case and the integrity of computers, and so on and so forth, there's a possession of a lot of amount of information that might be considered illegal, but it is for the consideration of the person, the issue, the context. But PLAAF has often turned away people that might have been very powerful whistleblowers where they came with a specific motive that was designed to create disruption and create destruction within the society or have a personal gain within that. So you have to really consider it on a case-by-case basis. And this was the case across a lot of countries, not so much South Africa, although there was one person that Bianca and I both know about who was a lawyer, and she was someone whose not motives were impure, but her role within things and the way in which she maneuvered and how opportunism at certain times meant that we had to pull back. So it is chosen on the basis of the person as well as the content.
Mary, I see that you've asked me a question. So I came to know PLAAF through Masilo. Masilo was the first, as Khadija had described. Khadija actually reached out to Masilo because there was an article written about it. And through Khadija meeting Masilo and I did support each other very much psychologically and very much. We regard ourselves as sisters. Khadija, Masilo put me in contact with Khadija, and that's how we met. And I will be honest with you, as whistleblowers, I mean, we've actually created a bit of quite a tight community because nobody else understands what you're going through. So to just have that other voice on the other side that makes you realize that you're not going crazy becomes really important. So yes, we have been in contact, and we certainly do support each other quite a lot.
There's a really good question about the EU whistleblowing directive from Miriam Mann, who's a phenomenal attorney in London. She says the EU whistleblowing directive includes the concept of a creation of a monetary pool to help whistleblowers with the cost of attorneys' fees. So from the outset, PLAAF provides pro bono legal support. Where the whistleblowers are not comfortable with the legal support provided, we allow them the choice of their own attorney, and we cover those fees. Where they have incurred previous fees, we go through it and we tax it at the Law Society if it was unjust or if they were taken advantage of. That's often the case, as well as law firms that have conflicts of interest or law firms that are exploiting whistleblowers without necessarily taking their case forward. They're usually limited to labor law. But in South Africa, with asset recovery, as Bianca and many other whistleblowers have discussed, and as we discussed in other countries, there really isn't a way to financially support the whistleblower as they go through the process of assisting the government over and over, or various parties at no cost, to sustain their lives. And very often industry does not provide them with the opportunity to earn an income because they are labeled as a snitch who cannot be trusted. And most companies are either coerced or voluntarily engage in a type of corruptivity because of the supply and demand nature of how politics works on high stakes deals, whether it's a private tender or a public-private initiative, and that's often the case in Africa. So the issue of asset recovery is critical, but in Nigeria with the legislation, we could see that whistleblowers had a financial incentive to disclose. So various rivals of political parties and of companies would often disclose on corrupt things that the other side had done in order to cash in, and that was politically motivated and itself was quite predatory. So there needs to be a financial support system that doesn't incentivize opportunistic disclosure that can corrupt the purpose of whistleblowing, and that does not feed into the public good, does not address accountability within the system. And one of the ways, Bianca might talk about this, is a percentage of money that is recovered by the state usually goes back to the state. And who knows how those monies are used, whether it's properly invested, whether the corruption or the rot that went involved in incurring the debt or the loss has been adjusted and addressed. So I think Bianca can talk more about that because she's helped Eskom recover over $1 billion, but has nothing to show for it except insecurity and precarity.
Yeah, so I was able to support our national utility, power utility, which is called Eskom, in a civil claim where they were successful in the civil claim against my former employer and McKinsey and Company, the global consulting company, in getting back 1.6 billion rand, South African rand. And the concern about that is that, you know, the money was paid back to Eskom, so Eskom was at least in the position where they were before this corruption took place. But this money goes back into an organization that is still rife with corruption. You know, not corrupt by going through McKinsey and Company or Trillian anymore, but just new suppliers basically doing the same thing and having the same behavior. And that's a huge pity because you go through all this effort to try and stop one thing just to have the rewards of that to, in essence, perpetuate it somewhere else. And that is really quite disheartening because, you know, with all corruption, if you want to stop it in a specific entity, you've got to be quite, you know, it's systemic, and you've got to do a root cause analysis, and you've got to get to the actual cause of it. And a lot of the time, it's just, in my opinion, it's a cultural issue coupled with the lack of good governance processes. But what if those things don't change, and you have all this taxpayer money flowing through the entity? You know, this corruption is honestly always just going to be there. So Khadija's right, you know, there has to also be those kind of considerations when you consider, you know, the kind of reward that could come out from whistleblowing.
Absolutely. And we've also seen some of the leaks that we got involved whistleblowers directly targeting very powerful people, but on further investigation, we were able to see that the facts were being taken out of context. And as Bianca spoke about this very often, facts must be located in the context of truth in order for it to serve the public interest, and PLAAF has to be very specific with its resources. But there are many other lawyers that support whistleblowers, that work on contingency, that need to be paid. And that was the case with some of the more high-profile people that approached us. They had a budget and they wanted their case settled out of court. They didn't want to make a disclosure that would be in the public interest, that would reach the public domain, that would be covered by media, that would go through a parliamentary process. So you have whistleblowers who just want to settle their case and make some money out of it, where they are reporting on a wrong, but it is not something that they want to put their lives down on the line for. And that was the huge, huge sacrifice that Bianca and Musilo and something like 14 South African whistleblowers made, most of them unnamed. For those who are named, their lives are just stagnant and frozen in the worst possible way. So if Professor Pogi agrees, we could possibly end the chat off on that note. But I just want to thank Bianca for the incredible sacrifice that she made. Her testimony yesterday, and it's going to go on for a long time. She's going to have to keep giving evidence over and over. And I hope that one of these companies recognize how brilliant she is, where she came from, how hard she worked, and give her what she deserves in life and what her kid deserves in life.
Thanks, Khadija. You're so kind.
Oh no, I think we've bored Professor Pogi. Okay, without further ado, let me indiplomatically end the chat. Thank you guys so much for coming, and we really appreciate all of the questions. We're sorry that it had to be cut short. I think we all have a few meetings to go to. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.
Goodbye, everyone.